The man stood on the chair with a gloomy expression. As if his heart was filled with a world-weary rage, he shouted, "Long live the Ebola virus! Death to all Americans! You're all dead in 2 weeks!" Then he suddenly pulled out a grenade. Kelly rushed forward to tackle the man, but it was still a step too late. The man turned into a ball of fire and exploded in the hospital. Just moments ago, the firefighters had completed a rescue mission. They brought the injured to the hospital and were preparing to leave. They never expected to witness the man pulling the pin of a grenade right there. After the explosion, the ER hall was reduced to ruins. A doctor suddenly recalled the man's last words. He speculated that the man was carrying the Ebola virus, but the explosion had scattered his flesh and blood everywhere. It was impossible to determine how many people had been infected. Terrified people swarmed out of the hospital. Lieutenant Casey quickly notified Chief Bowden to seal off the entire hospital entrance. No one was allowed in or out. Everyone who had escaped was forced to return. Firefighters assisted doctors in maintaining order inside the hospital. At the same time, they tried to calm the panicked crowd. A temporary quarantine zone was set up in the ER. Patients in the hospital were classified and isolated to prevent cross-infection. During this tense moment, Mills discovered Kelly lying motionless on the ground. After examination, the doctors diagnosed that Kelly was too close to the explosion center. Shrapnel had pierced through his entire chest. With such severe injuries, his chances of survival were extremely slim. After desperate pleas from everyone, the doctors decided to operate on Kelly immediately. Just then, Casey suddenly noticed a wisp of white smoke coming from the ventilation duct. He signaled for another firefighter, Otis, to help. Casey jumped onto the counter and pushed open the ceiling panel. Flames had already engulfed the space above the ceiling. The explosion had caused an electrical short circuit, igniting a fire. If they didn't extinguish it in time, the entire ER would be filled with thick smoke in 5 minutes. After receiving the report, the chief ordered fire extinguishers to be placed at the entrance. Scott grabbed the extinguishers and worked with Casey to put out the fire. Firefighters controlled the flames from 4 corners. They emptied one extinguisher after another. Finally, they managed to temporarily put out the fire. At the same time, the CDC was notified. They dispatched virus experts in full protective gear to enter the hospital. They collected tissue samples from Herman. After testing, it was confirmed that he carried a mutated strain of the Ebola virus. It was even more contagious than the original Ebola virus. Fortunately, at the moment of the explosion, the virus was still in its incubation period. There was no immediate risk of spreading, with the viral threat eliminated. The rescue work proceeded in an orderly manner. Soon, all the injured received swift treatment. Kelly's surgery also continued steadily. Everyone stood silently outside the operating room. The doctors removed piece after piece of shrapnel. Finally, they pulled Kelly back from the brink of death. The woman was preparing to drive to work. Suddenly, firefighters quickly arrived at the scene. According to the worker's description, they were conducting a pressure test on the sewer pipeline. Unexpectedly, the sewer exploded like a bomb. However, the driver of the red car that was blown away was unharmed. Instead, the chaos triggered a car accident. Someone was trapped in a car due to the strong water flow. The 2 people inside were about to drown. Eddie quickly reassured the frightened pair, and Buck smashed the car window as the water poured out. The people inside were finally out of danger, since both car doors were blocked by other cars. The firefighters decided to have them climb out through the sunroof. However, an issue arose on the woman's side. It turned out that her leg was stuck under the steering wheel. They decided to rescue the man in the passenger seat first. Unexpectedly, the man immediately refused. He insisted that he would not leave his girlfriend behind. Eddie said, "I need your seat to help her." Finally, after embracing his girlfriend, the man climbed out of the sunroof. Then Eddie got into the car. He tried to turn the steering wheel, but it wouldn't budge at all. Meanwhile, the woman's leg kept bleeding. She seemed seriously injured. At that moment, both car doors were still blocked. The only way to save her was to tow the car away.
I get the tow rope. I'm going back up.
The firefighters worked seamlessly together. With a command from the captain, the fire truck revved up its power. Finally, the trapped car was pulled out. Seeing this, the observer, Brad, who was a famous actor, was beyond excited. Just then, Brad noticed an unconscious woman inside another car. Instead of informing the firefighters, he rushed to save her on his own. Meanwhile, the rescue operation continued. Once the car was pulled out, they quickly opened the door. The paramedic immediately checked the woman's injuries.
Luckily, it missed your femoral. Thinking we can cut it right off. The wheel, not the leg.
At that moment, Brad rescued the woman from the other car. However, instead of being happy, the captain looked furious. Yet Brad was completely unaware. He only thought that he had saved someone and was a great hero.
Did you check her vitals?
No.
How about for any head injuries?
I got her out of the bloody car.
Then a bystander recognized Brad as a famous actor in a show. People started praising Brad enthusiastically. Brad basked in their admiration, feeling like an incredible hero. However, back at the firehouse, the captain furiously scolded him.
What you did back there was reckless and stupid.
That woman was in danger.
And if she'd had a spinal injury and you carried her around like that, you could have paralyzed her. That's why we always put people in seat collars before we move them.
At that moment, Brad finally realized that firefighting and rescue work was far more complicated than it seemed. The acrophobic man climbed a tall tree just to retrieve a kite. However, just as he grabbed the kite, the little girl was terrified. She quickly dialed 911 for help, saying her mom's boyfriend, Will, was stuck in the tree.
It's all my fault. He fell trying to get my kite.
When the firefighters arrived, they immediately set up the ladder to rescue him. Unexpectedly, even though Will was in excruciating stomach pain, he still clung to the tree, refusing to come down. With no other choice, the captain stepped in. Will explained that he was pursuing the girl's mother. He wanted the girl's blessing to marry her mom, and he climbed the tree to retrieve the kite to look like a hero. The captain understood Will's feelings, so he used the girl as motivation. He told Will that the girl was watching from below. This was not the time to mess up. Sure enough, Will was convinced. Summoning his courage, he climbed down from the tree. The captain's warm encouragement gave him a great boost of confidence. With the captain's guidance, Will finally made it back to the ground. The moment he landed, the little girl was the happiest of all. After all, her biological father wasn't around, and it was this man who had always filled that missing role.
Not my dad. He's my mom's boyfriend. He's better than my dad. My dad's never around. Will always is.
But just then, Will suddenly screamed in pain. His stomach swelled like a balloon, and within seconds, it expanded as if he were a pregnant woman. After a quick examination, paramedic Tommy suspected abdominal compartment syndrome. It turned out that when Will fell, his stomach was hit, causing tissue swelling, which cut off blood supply to his organs. At that moment, Will was crashing. Tommy said the only way to save him was to perform an emergency laparotomy to relieve the pressure. But as paramedics, they had limited equipment. They had no other choice. After quickly disinfecting Will's belly, Tommy raised the scalpel and made an incision. Then he told Nancy to grab a saline bag, using it as a sterile seal over the massive wound. Now, all they could do was pray it wasn't too late. But just then, the little girl suddenly ran over. The paramedics quickly covered Will's stomach.
Will, please wake up. The answer is yes, okay? You can marry my mom, but only if you don't die.
Surprisingly, those words were like a miracle cure.
Oh, that's a deal. I love you, kid.
I love you too, Dad.
Will had risked his life just to retrieve a kite, but luckily his efforts were not in vain.
Who could save this baby? The mother was giving the baby a bath, but accidentally fell asleep. The baby quickly sank into the water. When the baby's life hanging by a thread, the woman suddenly woke up, hastily lifting the baby out of the water. Fortunately, the rescue was timely. After checking, the baby was unharmed, but the woman was terrified by this unexpected incident. She felt like a terrible mother, so she made a bold decision. The next day, she took the child to the fire station, recorded a video for her husband telling him not to worry about her. Then she went to the seaside alone. She felt her presence threatened the child's safety. Maybe the child would be better off without her. The continuous care for the baby day and night had already exhausted this mother who pretended to be strong. Although she still loved her husband and child, she no longer had the courage to live. Images flashed through her mind, thinking of her husband who loved her deeply, thinking of the baby who had just been born. Awakening from her trance, she felt more horrified by her recent actions, worried that she might harm the baby again. Instead of going home, she went to the hospital for an examination, discovering she had postpartum thyroiditis, symptoms very similar to postpartum depression, but with proper treatment a full recovery was possible. She finally realized she was not a bad mother.